Have you ever picked up a game that you thought you'd be super interested in to then only play it for a few hours and realise that it's a load of horseshit? Well, this happened to me with Sleeping Dogs. I first picked up and played Sleeping Dogs in 2018 on my Xbox One, shortly after the release of Red Dead Redemption 2. Because I was craving another open world third person action game. I watched the trailers and gameplay snippets for Sleeping Dogs, and it looked like my cup of tea. An open world action game where you can pretty much do whatever you want outside story missions, such as customizing your character, purchasing vehicles such as cars and bikes, do side activities such as street races, fight clubs and cockfighting. Not that type of cockfighting that you're thinking about. And I was super excited to play the game after purchasing it digitally. So I booted it up and began the campaign. The introduction surprised me with how graphically impressive it looked for the game that was released in 2012, and how the developers really captured a dark and serious tone and look with the first cutscene, which immediately gets the player immersed. After a drug deal goes horribly wrong, you take control of the main protagonist, Wei Shen, and your objective is to escape the police who are chasing you and your partner across the Hong Kong harbour. You're thrown right into it and you have to escape the police by following your partner while also ducking and diving through different fish markets that are scattered across the harbour. You're running through crowds of people, sliding over tables, jumping through skylights. The entire introduction is phenomenal. This first piece of gameplay that you get to experience is exhilarating, and it instantly had me hooked. At the end of this mission, you and your partner unfortunately are arrested by the Hong Kong police and are transferred to police custody. I really did not know what to expect next, since the introduction was so much fun and was one of the best introductions to any game I have ever played. I was just hoping that the game continued at this pace and energy before throwing me into its open world. The protagonist, Wei Shen, then gets called into an interrogation room, and you find out that he's an undercover police officer tasked with infiltrating and taking down the Sun On Yee, a triad faction that has prolific dominance over the criminal underworld of Hong Kong. At the time I first played this game, I was once again shocked by what I had just seen, with finding out we were playing as an undercover cop, and I had a lot of faith from this point that the game was going to keep getting better and better. Wei Shen is then released onto the streets of Hong Kong, and he meets up with his old pal Jackie Ma, who he met while in police custody. Wei uses his friend Jackie as a way to join the Sun On Yee, so Jackie obliges to help with no knowledge he is a cop and takes him to see his boss. At this point, it seemed like the energy that the game had built up seemed to have put on its emergency brakes and massively slowed down after its explosive introduction. You're forced into a slow mission, which gives a bit of background on Wei Shen. This mission design is just Wei catching up with his old friend Jackie and walking through the back alleys of Hong Kong, with the mission finally finishing with a brawl against a bunch of enemies. This encounter with these enemies is your first experience with combat. The fighting seemed a bit basic and it didn't seem new or refreshing, other than the unique environmental takedowns that you could perform on enemies. It's just punch, kick or grab your enemies, which is the standard combat system for most action games. I got through this mission, and then Wei and Jackie eventually meet up with Winston Chu, a Sun On Yee Red Pearl who is the leader of the Water Street gang. After meeting Winston, Wei joins the gang and is then tasked with heading to the night market and collecting protection money from the various different vendors, while also fighting enemies in the exact same way you took down your first group of enemies in the previous mission. After this boring and somewhat repetitive mission, which feels like it's another stretch of the tutorial so you are familiar with the combat and environmental takedowns, you are then let out into the open world with no idea as to what to do next other than story missions. The game allows you to progress with the story with two different mission paths, where you can complete missions for the police force or the Sun On Yee. After completing a couple of these missions, which didn't impact the progression of the story whatsoever or didn't excite me, I explored what else the world had to offer. There was so much to see and do on the map from the get-go of being let free into the open world. I first decided to go to a clothes store to purchase some new threads for Wei, only to find out that I needed to be a certain face level to actually purchase this clothing so I could wear it. I then tried to tackle some of the side missions that were available to me after being let free into the open world of Hong Kong, But some of these gang hideouts, which are named drug busts, had enemies with guns and rifles, which immediately took me down as soon as I entered the area. I then tried my hand at some of the fight clubs scattered across the map, but again I would immediately get destroyed in round 4 or 5 because I hadn't unlocked new martial art techniques. This entire experience felt very jarring, given that the world was free to explore and for me to do whatever, but I felt restricted or handicapped to interact with what the world had to offer. The game at this point was uninteresting, and it seemed like it wanted me to proceed with the story so I could level up some more before taking on the side activities. The story didn't seem that interesting early on, and I wasn't bothered by the characters or open world since I couldn't do much in it. It was at this point during my first playthrough of Sleeping Dogs that I went to the pause menu, exited the game, and followed to uninstall. I found that the game had a strong and near perfect introduction, similar to the likes of Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty, which throws the player straight into the game and quickly tells you what you need to do before letting you run free and do whatever you want in the game while maintaining that energy. In reality, Sleeping Dogs for me originally fell off after the 4th or 5th mission, and it didn't continue with the excellent pacing it started off with, and then it just throws the player into a ruthless open world. The best way to describe my experience with Sleeping Dogs is like getting a boost of energy from sugar, and then 20 minutes afterwards you're just tired from your sugar levels dropping. Sleeping Dogs then joined my Xbox library, never to be touched again. That was only until a year later, in 2019, when I was speaking to my friend about Sleeping Dogs, and he told me he had completed the game. He told me how great the game was and told me all the cool things he had done in the game. He also emphasized that the story was the main standout from his experience and strongly suggested that I give it another go. I had nothing else to play at this time, so I thought I might as well just give it another shot. This time around, I purchased and installed the definitive edition of the game and booted it up with a fresh new perspective and started a brand new campaign so I could experience everything all over again. I completed the first set of missions and eventually got past the point of where I uninstalled. The following mission from where I uninstalled was the mission where Wei is tasked with heading to the Bam Bam Club and has to pressure the owner to work for Winston. The start of this mission tasks Wei with fast talking his way past the bouncers and then getting access to the VIP area by performing karaoke for one of the hostesses. You then head upstairs to confront Benny, the owner, and you get into a huge fight with his guards. It was at this point in my second playthrough that I was hooked back onto Sleeping Dogs. During this mission, you are taking down waves of enemies in the club by using your newly learned martial art techniques, weapons, or the environmental takedowns, one of which allows you to throw a guy into a fish tank and then use the fish that falls out of the tank to beat his mate up with. This was it. The energy I wanted the game to continue with was back. The game had me feeling like I was John Wick in Hong Kong, and I didn't want to put the controller down. After this mission, I explored more of the open world, and I was more capable of taking on the gang hideouts, and I was a slightly higher face level to purchase some of the clothing I wanted. I had learned new martial art techniques, so the fight clubs were slightly easier but still challenging. The game was rewarding me for progressing through the story, and because of this, I could experience more of what the open world had to offer. I was fully committed to Sleeping Dogs, and then I went on to finish the story and 100% complete the game. The game really had everything I wanted and more, and I kick myself sometimes for putting it down during my first playthrough back in 2018, only to come back a year later in 2019 to then call it one of my favorite games of all time. I became a Sleeping Dogs advocate, and anytime a friend would want suggestions for a game they should play next, Sleeping Dogs was the first one I would always mention. I would tell a couple of my friends the exact same story I have just told about my first playthrough, where I stopped playing early on and that the open world was boring, and if they do decide to pick up the game, they need to stick with it past this point because they will hopefully fall in love with this game. Then after the first set of friends I recommended the game to, I suggested Sleeping Dogs to more and more of my friends. I did tell you I became a Sleeping Dogs advocate. When I suggested Sleeping Dogs to my friends, they all mostly responded in the same way, which shocked me. The more friends I would suggest Sleeping Dogs to, the more of my friends would say that they have already played some of it, then stop playing. I received this response way too many times from my different friends, and it became quite strange yet obvious to me that most people who have played Sleeping Dogs gave up on the game, just like how I did during my first playthrough. It became very apparent that this was the Sleeping Dogs problem and that I needed to identify exactly what was causing this issue. So much so that I went on to make this video. I was so confused that most people who had played this game experienced the game as I experienced and stopped playing. There are a lot of variables to consider as to why people stopped playing Sleeping Dogs. Was it because people saw it as a GTA clone and they thought they'd probably get the same experience but better from actually playing a Grand Theft Auto title such as Grand Theft Auto 5? Was it because when this game first came out, it was competing against huge sequels to well-established gaming franchises such as Borderlands 2, Far Cry 3, Max Payne 3, and Mass Effect 3? Or was it because the game had started off with an intense and fantastic introduction, which was then followed by a decline in the pacing? It's impossible to pinpoint exactly why every single person stopped playing Sleeping Dogs from the start of the game, because everyone has their own unique gaming taste. However, I think the main culprit for the reason people stopped playing Sleeping Dogs is because of its unique approach to the open world design and its explosive introduction, which is then followed by some lackluster starting missions. The world is open to you after the 4th or 5th mission, allowing you to do whatever you want. You can purchase clothes, take part in fight clubs, perform drug busts, do some street racing, but the player early on is not ready to experience any of this. If you do attempt to try some of these side activities, you will be punished or have a really challenging time. The start of the open world is almost like window shopping. The game shows you all these cool and exciting side activities, but the player isn't ready to take on any of it until they progress with the story and learn new martial art techniques or moves. But the game doesn't tell you any of this, so the player has to have some faith that the story will continue to get better to then find out that they will be rewarded with better vehicles, new martial art techniques, a higher face level, and so on, so that they can eventually jump into the open world and experience everything that it has to offer. There are similar games that have this same issue, such as Fallout New Vegas, for example. Fallout New Vegas allows the player to do whatever they want from the start of the game, but if the player wanders too much away from the first quests early on, they will be punished by some stronger enemies that will destroy them in seconds. If you stick with the first dozen quests in Fallout New Vegas, you're able to explore more of what the open world has to offer, eventually allowing you to do whatever you want. Grand Theft Auto 5 does it very well, where it will have a mission to provide you with what you need to know to then be able to do something similar to that mission as a new side activity that is available in the world. If you're a fan of open world action games, then I can't recommend Sleeping Dogs enough. Sure, it has some flaws such as its arcadey driving and very simple shooting, but everything else the game has to offer makes up for this and makes it one of the best games I have ever played. I could go into what makes this game so special, such as the intense and gripping story, the unique characters, or its vast and amazingly detailed open world, but I covered this previously in my Sleeping Dogs is a Masterpiece video. So if you want to find out what makes this game so special, definitely check out that video. All in all, if you're watching this video and have previously played Sleeping Dogs but stopped playing because you thought it was boring or uninteresting, I strongly urge you to give it another shot, and it could well and truly become one of your favorite games of all time. Some of my friends who I convinced to give Sleeping Dogs another shot ended up really enjoying the game and kick themselves for stopping with their first playthrough. Or even yet, Sleeping Dogs might not be your cup of tea and isn't the game for you, and I can completely respect that. If you are one of those people who have not played Sleeping Dogs either, it's definitely worth picking up and giving a go, since it goes on sale quite a lot, and it can be as cheap as $4, which is cheaper than a cup of coffee in most countries. I'm currently replaying through Sleeping Dogs on PC, and I have already finished the story, and I am now going for the 100% once again, because the game is extraordinary throughout your entire playing experience. So hopefully after seeing this video, you decide to give Sleeping Dogs another go or play it for the first time. If you do, please drop the video a like rating. If you have played this game before and stopped playing but are going to give it another go after watching this video, please let me know in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm having a lot of fun making content on Sleeping Dogs, and I have some other exciting videos planned to make on this game. So that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.